more time you're holding your baby, smelling your baby, talking to your baby, being with your baby, the more your brain will change. And that introduces a new period of neuroplasticity for us as parents, which is incredible. If we don't have the emotional piece, it's not the full picture, and we can still actually build in some vulnerability into the mental health.
We confuse the feelings with the behavior. If you look at it into a baby, there's just feelings.
Nurtured presence is to be the person for them that is always safe. They exist with us. We are part of them. We are part of their stress system, or an extension of it for those first 3 years. We have that very well documented in adults that is the exact prescription for us to develop anxiety and depression and really, really serious physical health risks. The low nurture is there. We all have very reactive brains, and that leads to less compassion, empathy, more aggression, more of the things that you do not need.
Either if you haven't done previous work, it's not easy to parent. Todas las madres y padres buscamos las respuestas a una pregunta crucial. ¿Qué necesita mi hijo para desarrollarse plenamente y cómo puedo acompañarle para proporcionarle aquello que necesita? Nuestra invitada de hoy, Greer Kirshenbaum, neurocientífica, doula e investigadora, cree que la ciencia ya ha proporcionado una certera respuesta a esta pregunta. La presencia, el cuidado afectuoso y atento, nuestra capacidad de estar sintonizados y dar respuesta a las necesidades del bebé, sobre todo en los primeros 3 años de vida, construyen cerebros fuertes y resilientes. Greer nos invita a confiar en nuestro instinto parental innato, porque de ello depende, en gran medida, prevenir problemas serios de salud mental en el futuro. Es un privilegio tenerla hoy con nosotros para explorar este tema tan importante. Thank you, Greer. Welcome.
Thank you
so much for being here with me. I was really looking forward to speaking to you. And I would like to start on a personal note, and is that your work really confirms what I intuitively knew when I first became a mother, of being close to my child, giving nurture, and that wasn't easy because of the input of social culture. And I think your work is going to be very, very supportive for parents under the umbrella of the science, for them to be nurturing in a unique way, in the way that they need and in a tuned way. So thank you so much in advance for all the work that you do.
I'm so happy to hear it. And I'm always my heart always gets so full when I hear a mother say that with all the influence out there, I call it low nurture culture, you still, that voice, your intuitive voice was still strong enough to say, everyone else says this is right, but I know it's not, and I'm going to do it my own way. So it's just remarkable, because the pressures are so strong, and
Absolutely.
And that a lot of people listening might find that too. Right?
And sort of like also it gives us permission to do it the way that we intuitively knew we had to be with our babies. And it puts us, it prevents us from shame and guilt as well.
Yes.
Right. That we feel so often.
And there's so many layers. Like, one layer of the shame and guilt is, oh, I'm doing something different than everyone else. And then the next layer is that most people in your life are going to criticize it, tell you that you're doing it wrong, like undermine it and cut it down as much as possible. I see that. I don't know if you experience that, but I see that with a lot of people. And you still have to have that knowing. And with all of that happening too, and hopefully that's what you're saying now.
Yeah, so hopefully everything that you do, your research, your work is going to support this way of being with our babies, and we're going to get into that now. So Can you tell us about a little bit about your background and how you left the lab and came to the
Yeah,
real world to to share your knowledge and your insights and everything with professionals and families as well?
for sure. Yeah, I had a long career in science, doing, hands-on experiments for many, many years, all lab work. I did going into it throughout the end of my undergrad and the beginning of my PhD, I really did want to apply the research in the real world in some way. At that time, I knew that we were finding remarkable neuroplasticity, remarkable brain building in a lot of different systems in babies in those first 3 years. And I thought, I don't see anyone addressing that in the real world. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that would look like, now I see them a little bit more, but maybe some of those sort of like outdoor play schools, outdoor, learning centers where kids can, play in natural kind of jungle gyms and environments and all this kind of stuff. So it was much more sensory sort of oriented at the beginning. And then over, over about 15 years while I was in science, the work on the emotional brain was building. Mm-hmm. And I would just collect it, I have folders on my computer, they're still there.
Wow.
Where I would just put all the papers in and be like, oh my gosh, it's mounting. There's like more and more and more. And it was so exciting that then at the end, I was just really motivated to bring that out, because I think that was the sensory motor stuff develops along with the emotional work, and if we focus on the emotional part and the relationship part, the rest follows. So yeah, by the end of my postdoc, I thought, we know so much. I've always been kind of drawn to science communication and applying it, that I just knew exactly how to do it then. It evolved, years since, but I just had that.
Yeah, and with the experience of being a mother, I guess, also, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so you're the mother of a child.
Yes, yeah, I have a little boy.
Yeah, and you're the mother of a book.
Yeah, this is my other baby. My
Yeah,
dog is
this
my
a
other
beautiful baby. Yes, yes.
Thank you.
It's called The Nurture Revolution. I hope it gets translated into Spanish.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, and I would like to start by something that you say in the beginning of your book, and I have it written right here. And you say, nurturing might seem simple, but it's actually a radical departure for what you call low nurture culture. And you mentioned Spain as one country that had initially quite higher nurture practices, but now it's also one of the low nurture cultures, together with Brazil, China, and India. Can you expand on this concept?
Yeah, absolutely.
How was initiated? Yeah.
Yeah, all of the countries that I mentioned there, including Spain, were ones that people had come to me and sort of told me that information. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure who the doctor is, but in Spain, I was told there was like one big doctor who was had brought sleep training to the country and kind of made it really popular and as big as possibly in Canada and the United States. Mm-hmm. In India and China, I've been told by many people as well that it's been social media that has brought it in. Mm-hmm. And sort of looking to influencers and people who have babies who are influential and have big followings, and they've learned it from probably some other Western countries like probably the United States mostly. But yeah, it's the biggest in Canada, the US, the UK, Australia. Those are the biggest places, Commonwealth countries and the UK. But it's certainly, I'm hearing more and more and more about it.
Right. And what are the characteristics of a low nurture culture?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people will say they start to feel the pressure of low nurture culture, with the biggest feature being a focus on how the baby has to be separate from mother and father. They start hearing it in the womb. They start hearing, you better not, when you have that baby, you better not hold it a lot. You don't make sure you're not going to spoil your baby. Like all of these kinds of things that people hear. People will share stories of, their own ways that they've put separation between them and their baby, and that's sort of told that that's the way. In birth, we see it, taking babies out of the room, not putting babies right onto their mother, which is the only place a baby should be in all kinds of medical circumstances. And then, that continuing through the newborn time, right? The same kind of stuff. They have to put the baby down. Put the baby down. Don't hold it too much. Don't respond to it all the time. Or there's a cutoff, right? Maybe you could be, you could spoil it, right? And people say, spoil your baby for a couple months, but at 4 months, they have to fall asleep by themselves. They have to spend lots of time alone. They can't hold them all the time, right? Really separating is the kind of the seed of low nurture culture, because a lot of things then downstream get affected. The relationship gets reflected. So you're not spending as much time in a back and forth communication with your baby. You become more disconnected from their cues for being tired and hungry and playful and all of the things, the ways that they need us to respond. It separates that too. And that, then that relationship continues on that path.
On and on.
Yeah.
And you also say that is actually, at least from the Industrial Revolution, that this is happening. Certainly we were parented that way, where, we were not in bed or, as close with our parents, and everything that you say, we experience it ourselves. And I think we are now a generation with this information that you're bringing, that we are cycle breakers, right?
Yeah,
a generation that is turning around and saying, what is the science behind this? And we find that science doesn't support that way of parenting. Yeah. So in this sense, which you're an expert on it, what is a highly nurture? What are the characteristics and,
Yeah, it's the complete opposite of what I just described, right? It's starting the connection in the womb, starting to talk to your baby, touch your baby, sing to your baby. Fathers and partners and family members also can connect to the baby in the womb. It's having connection beginning at birth as soon as possible, and remaining in a really close, responsive relationship. So, both physically and emotionally, attuned and responsive to babies as they grow up. And along with that, really following their cues, right? Feeding them when they're hungry, offering sleep when they're tired, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And how is the brain involved? Like, how is a parent's brain, which, for what I read in your book and many studies, starts developing in the womb? I mean, you get pregnant and your brain starts wiring towards the baby already. Can you talk about the transformation in the brain of the parent and in the baby when it's born, and how are they interrelated, and how transformative it is?
Yeah, I didn't quite realize how powerful it was until I wrote my book. Wow. And how much of a mirror image there is in development between babies and parents. Mm-hmm. So mothers will start their change during pregnancy, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us know this. We're sort of like, I'm forgetting things. might be thinking about the baby a lot and planning for the baby, and just your attention and focus shifts. Work might become less of a top of mind priority. Friendships, all the kinds of things can shift around. And certainly once mothers have babies, they notice this too. They're like, we call it, I have mom brain, or I'm in a brain fog. And so a lot of parents get very relieved to know that these are true changes that are happening. There are many, many areas of our brain that dramatically shift in order for us to be nurturing and present and, aware and attuned to our babies. We have these huge shifts. And this is supposed to happen so that we can protect and nourish our babies and ourselves. And for fathers or partners, their brain changes start to happen somewhere between 12 and 14 weeks after the baby's born. And I always want people to know that it's dose dependent, that the more time you're holding your baby, smelling your baby, talking to your baby, being with your baby, the more your brain will change. And that's a really good thing because it makes you more sensitive to your baby and will enhance your parenting, way beyond the baby years too. So there's real changes. They're made to make us nurturing. And along with it, it introduces a new period of neuroplasticity for us as parents, which is incredible. And people can harness this in a lot of different ways. One is this caregiving relationship where they might be taking care of another, having a secure relationship with another, maybe being their baby for the first time in their life. That can cause huge changes psychologically, and in the brain to be healing for mental health. They are probably taking care of themselves for the first time ever, actually hearing the needs that they have and understanding that when they meet them, it's, also really healing and also for their well-being, that maybe they've been silencing that for a really long time. And then our own sort of stress regulation and empathy can grow. It's just an amazing time. And some people who maybe have a little more time or more motivation can take advantage of that neuroplasticity in a lot of different ways too. So a lot of the work that you guys do, a lot of mindfulness practice can happen during that time. Brain injury healing happens in that time, which is incredible. All different things, can change in that period, and it's miraculous.
And there's not many times that we have this period of this neuroplasticity, right? There's one at 6-year-old, in the teens, when you give birth, and then I've read in menopause.
Yes,
well,
the menopause
right?
is a new field. I'm
I'm so excited. I'm going through it right now, and it's I mean, it's huge because you have those lost memory and some similar things that you had when you give birth. Yeah, and it's a new opportunity, and that's another topic that we'll speak about. But it is a very important time in your life, and forgetting and being attuned to your baby, wanting to start to be all the time with your baby, is something that it's happening within your biochemical response, right? Yeah. Absolutely. And that can happen for adoptive parents as well, right? Because if you were saying for parents, it develops while they are with their babies. It can happen, I assume, with adoptive parents, grandparents as well.
And also for any of us who work with babies. So if you're a doula, you're spending a lot of time around birth and babies, or a nanny, or anyone who has their practice with babies. If you have babies around, you will have those changes too. Just really
right, which is amazing. And can you talk a little bit about the there's two very important aspects that you mention in the book, and it's presence and empathy. Mm-hmm. And I guess this have to do with the reward network and the emotional regulation network. Can you talk about them and what they are, why they are key?
Yeah, completely. So I think it's, those aspects are what take this approach in the nurture revolution past attachment parenting. Mm-hmm. Because we start to get involved and interested in the internal world of the baby and the internal world of the parent, and really highlight the importance of that. So, attachment, there's attachment theory and then attachment parenting, they're separate. And attachment parenting, I love attachment parenting so much. So many of the recommendations in my book come from attachment parenting. Mm-hmm. Like baby wearing, bed sharing, breastfeeding if you can, belief in the baby's cry, all of these, wonderful things, fantastic. But I know we can do a lot of these practices of attachment parenting and not necessarily, maximize growing the foundation of mental health in a baby. And so by that I mean we can do a lot of the baby B's and attachment parenting, but if we don't have the emotional piece, it's not the full picture, and we can still actually, build in some vulnerability into the mental health system if we do all the baby B's without the emotional piece. There's still a lot of potential for that. So with nurtured presence, it's an invitation to radically change from how we treat babies and children, and probably a lot of other ages of people, but especially babies and children, because their voices are small or not there yet, to really be fully accepting of who they are right now, to love them, be delighted in them, and see them and hear them regardless of what emotion they're feeling in the moment, regardless of how much stress they have in their body or joy or any of the emotions. There's different ways to show up when they're experiencing different states, but the idea of a nurtured presence is to be the person for them that is always safe and is always loving them and doesn't have any conditions on it, because the opposite in low nurture style parenting is to send away negative emotions, like isolate, punish, suppress negative emotions, and to love and cherish a baby or child when they're feeling happy or joyful or excited. And so that is putting conditions on access to our unconditional love and presence for them. So that's, I think, the most important part of this approach.
I see. It's more because it might be even easier when they're babies, right? Because you cannot tell to a baby you should know better. How they're gonna know better, right? I mean, although when they grow older, we sometimes approach them, maybe in adolescence they should know better, right? And we confuse the feelings with the behavior. If you look at it into a baby, there's these feelings. It's these feelings, and they're communicating what they feel in that moment. And I guess it's important for what you say to separate their feelings from your feelings, because sometimes you can mash with what they're feeling, and that make you feel insecure, not capable. It's not easy either. If you haven't done previous work, it's not easy to parent, and it's especially with the first one. Sometimes you don't know what to do and what's best.
Yeah, we feel like it's a hijacking of our own nervous system or stress system.
Yeah, yeah. So
It's really
how does the stress system works in parents and in babies? And if you can talk about the co-regulation, I think this is key.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of
To
the
be
biggest
able
myths.
to be present with them.
Yeah. There's a lot of aspects of parenting a baby, and I should also say, through a neuroscience lens, we define baby as 0 to 3 years old, where a lot of other places would have that definition be a lot shorter.
Yeah.
They're truly, from a brain perspective, emotionally a baby and, physically a baby for 3 entire years of life. So it's important to understand that. And we expect them to do a lot of things that little brain is not able to do. The biggest one that you mentioned is the stress system. One of the biggest myths is, that fuels that low nurture kind of approach that we've been talking about is they have to learn how to go from a state of high stress to low stress by themselves very young. I just saw this program that doctors in America give to their patients. They're guided by it. At 4 months, they're saying your baby has to start falling asleep by themselves. So put them down drowsy but awake. That's incredibly stressful to a lot of babies. We can imagine that scenario where we put our baby down. Our doctors told us they should be going to sleep on their own. I will just say, spoiler alert, babies need our help to fall asleep for a very long time, and children do too. But they're just not capable. Their brains aren't capable. So their stress system can mount a stress response, but they do need what you've mentioned. They do need co-regulation to go from a state of high stress to low stress. And we're that missing piece for them. They exist with us. We are part of them. We are part of their stress system. We're an extension of it for those first 3 years and a little beyond as well. And they absolutely require that. So that sort of self-soothing, you have to teach them, they have to be alone. It's really, really misguided. They're not able to do it. So for parents who are listening, if you are rocking, feeding, cuddling your baby to sleep, if you have that urge to respond to their stress like that every single time, that's exactly what they need us to do, and what we're also wired to do.
Right. And what is happening when you're what's happening in the brain when the baby's stressed?
Yeah.
And,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and how the parents what's happening in the brain of the parents as well when they're stressed, and how they can calm down and and approach in a calm and nurturing way.
Yeah. So we, always think of the dyad, right? It's always the baby only exists with the parent, and as far as their brain development, as far as their brain, regulation, and in the sense of being whole for a baby, they need those safety signals from their parents' presence to feel complete in those early years. So when our baby does get stressed, many of us will also have a stress response, or at least an alerting response. Oh, something's happening, and it depends, right? Sometimes I'll say sometimes if we have been taking good care of ourselves, if we're well resourced, we might not get activated into a stress response when our baby does. And so I always encourage parents to be aware of their basic needs, be aware of their emotions, and try to get in front of it. Try to give yourself what you need so that you can have the best chance at having access to your own regulation throughout the day. It is also has health benefits in every domain that we can measure. So sometimes you'll be able to just respond. Sometimes you'll be able to be like, oh, it's a great day, and just be there for your baby and, pick them up if they're needing that, hold them, rub their back, feed them. And you'll find that, being there and being present and using your words will lower their stress curve, over a few minutes of time. And sometimes it can be longer if it's something very, very stressful or painful for a baby. Other times, especially if we haven't been getting what we need, we can easily get activated, easily ourselves go right up into fight or flight or even a freeze response. And that means our stress is really high as well. And I would want all parents to have a few different tools for themselves to first have awareness of that, because that's a very important first step. And then tools to regulate. And so they might say, okay, my baby's having a big feeling. It's their feeling, but I'm having a reaction to it. I'm gonna, shake it out, or, go outside and take a breath, or, something that will help. And so once you're regulating or regulated, then you can kind of approach your baby and be more helpful. And a lot of the things we actually do to calm our babies are also calming us.
Soothing for us, yeah.
So, we think about how do we calm a baby. We're probably picking them up, holding them chest to chest. That's releasing oxytocin in us as well. We have lots of receptors on our chest that are, feel good receptors. So does the baby. We're probably singing or rocking. So we know that singing and humming is activating our vagus nerve here. And is calming. Rocking movement is calming. So we can think of ourselves doing it together in some cases too. And we don't want to prevent our babies from feeling stress. That's not what this is about. I think that sometimes that's a criticism of any kind of gentle parenting, kind of approach. Absolutely not, because that can also create anxiety for babies and be unhelpful for their developing stress system. There's so many normal things in life that are stressful for babies. They get hurt, they fall down, they get too hungry or too tired or, overstimulated. There's so many things that are naturally going to be causing stress in our baby. And it's really our job to notice those cues and show up and help them lower it. And, it's healthy for them to have that mounted stress response and to have us co-regulate back down. So I think thinking about it like that, like we're there to respond. It's not, something we have to prevent. But when we do, babies will end up spending a lot of time with their brain bathed in neurochemicals that are going to shape their brain structures towards mental wellness. If they're experiencing long periods of crying, long periods of being alone or separated, in a freeze state where they are quiet or, appearing to be, good, or, that kind of thing can be conditioned from ignoring repeatedly. Their brains tend to experience a lot more stress, more high stress states, and that can actually grow vulnerability to mental health struggles. I think that's the biggest reason why so many people are suffering right now.
Right, because what happens when the baby is not being responded to in the brain? What happens?
Yeah, it's an overwhelming stress response. You imagine a baby cannot protect themselves, cannot feed themselves, sometimes can't even move. And when they're signaling, it's, very, very serious. A very serious ask of, I'm alone, scared for my life. Someone please tell me that I'm not alone, that I need my caregiver. And if we allow that to go on for long periods of time, their stress levels get very high and last for a very long time. We have that very well documented in adults that is the exact prescription for us to develop anxiety and depression and really, really serious physical health risks. And it's the same for babies, but it's also even more influential because it's actually shaping the core circuitry in their brain that will make up their stress system later on. So they're more likely to experience it then, and then they're more likely to have that same stress response later. Right?
And it does wire differently the brain when you have a nurture caregiver with you, or you have a different response. That's the brain, because I saw some studies as well of babies that they were not nurtured and in orphans, and the proper brain is more it shrinks, right? It's not the same brain than a baby that has been taken care of and responded to.
Absolutely. And that's one of the most startling parts, is every part of the stress system that we have looked at, both in animal models and then later in people, show the brain it's not just a little difference. Nurture doesn't make a little difference. It makes an enormous difference. And I've posted some of those images online that people can see on my Instagram page. But and I actually have one planned very soon that says exactly this, because it's been in my mind lately. It's like we are living, most people on the planet right now, not in every country, but in a lot of the countries where low nurture is there, we have we all have very reactive brains, and that leads to less compassion, empathy, more aggression, more of the things that
ADHD, anxiety, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's it's not a belief, it's science, and it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe we should go through some myths.
Sure.
That you have in your book that I think they are very, very important. And actually, I want to read something that you write before of all the myths, and says in page 21, I know you have your book there.
I do.
At the end, it says, the nurture revolution turns these notions on their head. You're talking about, all the low nurture culture, showing us that closeness, responsiveness, and honoring infant experiences and feelings are the path to a good mental health and resilience. And we've been, I think at large, we've been fed by these myths. And the first one, it's infants don't remember anything, so experience in infancy doesn't really matter. And I've heard that firsthand so many times. Like, it doesn't really matter. They don't remember. That's the thing. They don't remember. You can put them, 4 months old, separated from the mom, and they won't remember. It doesn't really matter. So can you talk about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually just heard an interview with Peter Levine recently where he talked about a memory or an event he had. I think he said he was about 6 months old. His parents went on vacation and he was cared for by his grandparents, who he knew but not very well, at 6 months, and that has left a very big impact on his life, which is just an interesting example, right? Where people would say, oh yeah, of course, like, he's going to be fed, he's going to be changed, we're going to love him, and he's not, there's no way he'll remember this. He's only 6 months, right? Fast forward, a long time.
It does matter.
It does matter. And, every I speak to a lot of therapists, a lot of different types of, modalities. they are working with infant memory. They know that they are working with infant memory. So it absolutely matters. I think I sort of like clear this up in the reality where the infant brain does have a huge capacity for memory, but it's implicit memory, which makes up our, brain systems that form our mental health. It's not autobiographical memory, which is what, the public thinks, oh, there's only memory. It's the who, what, when, where.
Explicit, memory. Memory, yeah.
But there's a lot of different kinds of memory. There's motor memory, there's sensory memory, and then there's, emotional memory. So I define memory within neuroscience as an event happens, which changes brain circuitry that remains. So, and may or may not have an effect, right? So for babies, the experiences they have between 0 to 3 are left as memory signatures in the brain in terms of brain connections, proteins being expressed, DNA being modified, and those stay, and then later on become the parts of the brain that form mental health. So all the experience in infancy is building really important memories, really, really important implicit memories for babies.
And you were saying myth 2 is responding to cries. That's another one. Responding to cries. I think we at least in my generation, we grew up like that, right? With this myth. Responding to cries spoils an infant or teaches an infant to be dependent. Oh, you're spoiling them too much,
People
right?
are really, really focused on this, and I do like to flip that one on its head and argue that putting the baby down, making them cry, be alone, that is what, I would never say it's anyone's spoiled, but when we have lower nurture, that is what's setting up their brain for more vulnerability later. So it is the opposite. When we keep them close, when we're really responsive and have that nurtured presence, we're building them to be really resilient, really independent, really able to live up to the potential of who they are, which is the dream of parents.
Yeah, and it's the fundament, right? The fundament in the body, in the nervous system, so they are capable to be calm, because it's wired within them. It's not something mentally developed, like rationalizing. They don't have it. It's embodied. It's in the body. In the body, they feel they're safe, they're secure, and that translates later on in your life.
Yeah,
that's the big difference.
I've recently asked my community, because I heard this from so many people, and I see it with my own son, and I could see it when he was a baby. I said, do you have a sense that your baby in a crowd of babies has different qualities, and what are they? And I got so many responses, hundreds of yes, that I thought it was just me, but my child is so secure, so trusting, so social, so curious and exploratory, because they don't have to spend any drop of energy wondering when I get stressed, is someone going to help? Or am I safe? Or is someone out there protecting me? They just know that. And so they can spend all of their mental energy on just interacting and learning and growing. So yeah, I mean, I think every single parent is doing everything they can to give their children, all the wishes, that they have. But these myths are, all have to be essentially flipped around to the opposite.
Yeah. What else? There's many. There's like 30. We're not going to read all of them.
Yeah,
I really
always
hope that If the audience speak and can read in English, I highly recommend it, and I hope it gets translated to Spanish soon because it is so important. But I do want to read the most relevant for me. Oh, this is a good one. I remember, like, being with my baby is doing nothing, right? We are so used to like doing, like, and it's reward. When by society, doing is reward, doing in the action. The more you do, the more rewarded you are, right? And I remember when I had my first child, that I follow my instinct, and I was like, my baby right here with me. I want to see him. I want to respond to him, and yeah, there was this pressure because the time changes. I remember like the time was different when you have your baby. Everything slows down because it's just another time frame altogether, right? And society is like, okay, so when you're gonna start working again, which I never really stopped working, but I was doing the most important job in my life, which was attending to my child and to myself.
Yeah.
So I could be for him, right? But it was again this contrast, this pull of what you're supposed to be doing to be recognized, and what you're doing with being with your baby, it's considered to do nothing.
Yep.
Right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, if you want to talk about this one.
Yeah, it's so important. I think a huge part is that it's just so deeply programmed that we're only worthy or successful if we're doing something that we can show for it, that we can see it. So, oftentimes if we're home with a baby, and by the end of the day, there's lots of undoing. There's probably more dishes in the sink. It's probably a bigger mess. And yet we have been doing so much brain building for ourselves and our baby. If we still need to cling to the productivity part, which I think many of us do, including myself, I feel like that made me feel really good at the end of the day to say, often like husband or partner comes home and they're like, "What'd you do today?" Like a really good question.
I know.
Moms will say, "I did nothing. Like we did nothing. We were here all day. We went outside for a minute, or I went out for lunch, but that was also nothing. Whatever it is." And I always try to help people understand what you have done, right? You have probably built, billions of connections in your baby's brain. They're growing 100 million connections per second in their brain that you are providing an environment for that. You've probably learned your baby's cues better. You probably laughed together or looked into each other's eyes, rested, fed your baby is a huge effort. And these things have, for a very long time we've been told like that's nothing, like that's women's work, or that's, not that masculine productivity energy. It's feminine work. And I think a lot of places are now trying to just have that come into our consciousness. We need feminine energy. We need feminine acts in the world. Mothering a baby, whether that's a mother or father doing it, that's feminine work.
And we can give this recognition to ourselves by this dialogue that we are having. We can give this recognition, and something else that we have to ask for it is like it's not being retributed. Like nobody's paying you for this. It's the most important job in the world. We are raising future generations, and we are saving a lot of money to the institutions, right? Because we're doing this important work, and there is not support. So it's a huge, high expectation
Yep.
from society, like to be a good mother, good father, you know, raising our children. We have so much responsibility, and you know, I'm putting this in front because you can see a high expectation and no support
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
no support whatsoever, no incomes, nothing. So that's another aspect
Yeah.
that, you know, I think these kind of conversations are very important to have. Because if institutions, they don't give that support, we have to give it to ourselves.
Absolutely. There's a few studies that showed that being home and taking care of a baby would be the equivalent of like between $150,000 to $200,000 a year job. The amount, right? So
Right.
we're probably giving that up. We're probably giving up our own career for a time. It is really, yeah. I mean, it's work.
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard work. It's hard work. Yeah. Yeah. And at the same time that we are parenting, a lot of the times we are reparenting ourselves
Yes.
from the damage that it's been done to us
Yes.
because we didn't have this knowledge.
Yes.
So it's hard work.
It's double. Yeah. You have two babies. You have your inner baby, and you have the baby in front of you, and you have to take care of them. at both.
Your partner's baby, and right? So it's like right. A lot of babies going on in the home. Right. Just to close, maybe some tools, some practices, something that parents, mothers, anyone that is listening to us and they have babies, they're in touch with babies, they can, you know, have this in mind, have this conversation in mind, have the science in mind in order to support their journey as caregivers. And some concrete, and also I want to mention something here. We've been talking about, I was privileged to be with my two boys for a very long time at home. Not everyone has this privilege. And if you can touch on this, and mothers that they have to like work every day and leave their infant in the care of a nurse, in the care of somebody else in the school, please let's talk on this, because I don't want to create, you know, like, oh my God, I'm leaving my baby. I really want to be with my baby. You know, this is where the institutions should step in.
Yes.
You know, because if you have to go to work and make your living, you have to do it, and you know, you have to make your living. So for these mothers and fathers, can you touch on this? Also, I know you mentioned in your book that the time you spend with your baby is good enough, right? Like it's good enough.
Absolutely. I don't want anyone to feel worried about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is really the quality of the relationship over quantity. And, you know, actually there's a really interesting study. I think it was done in Australia, but I have to double check. They actually showed that stay at home, a contrast between the amount of time stay-at-home mothers spent with their kids in the 1950s, working mothers spend with their children now, is way higher now. So that doesn't mean if you're stay-at-home, it doesn't mean you're necessarily actually getting more time or getting more quality time, like having that quality time, right? It's at the end of the day, it's about having the relationship, and that even if you're going to work. So the time that you are with your baby, knowing. You know, a lot of the practices I have in the book, the way that we can respond to them when they're happy, sad, sleeping, that will all be a huge, huge factor in growing their brain and growing your brain to as much health as possible. So, yeah, I always say, do what you do, let the rest go. There's a lot of things in the world we can't change, including that pressure and lack of parental leave. And including just not being able to do everything. We can't possibly do all the things. We can do our best, and our best is good enough. Always is good enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Greer, so much for the work that you do and the light that you bring and the hope that you bring to the parents and families. And I guess also to summarize our conversation, this is a shift of paradigm that we're doing from doing to being with and being attuned with our babies. It's not doing to our babies, it's being with our babies. Yeah.
Very, very important.
Yeah. So I also want to mention that we're going to do a workshop with Greer in November, December. We haven't set a date yet, but it's coming. So be attuned to us, to Nirakara, and see. Probably we announce it at the end of June. We're really looking forward to have you back. This is your home. And yeah, thank you so much again for all your sharing and your insights and knowledge.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Greer. Talk to you soon.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.